Hey everybody, ABC 10 meteorologist Brenden Mincheff here with a look at the forecast because there's not a whole lot to talk about in the short term. It's cold, there's some fog, but what does December look like? We know December is one of our rainiest months of the year. Well, if you're reading right here, dry and mild start is going to be dominated by high pressure. We'll talk about why that's the case towards the end of the video, but I do want to start with what we've seen really since Thanksgiving morning. It has been cold out there. In fact, Sacramento Executive Airport, which is a little bit away from the downtown urban core, right, kind of away from some of the heat island effects, reached 32 degrees. Stockton, 31 degrees. You can see the comparison there between the airport, the Executive Airport, which is away from the urban heat island, and downtown, which is obviously that station right in the middle of it. 4-degree difference. Friday morning was still cold, not quite as cold for most of the valley as it was on Thanksgiving, the exception there being Modesto. It was a couple degrees colder there. But then Saturday morning was cold again, and Sacramento Executive Airport provisionally has tied Thanksgiving for the coldest morning of the year with a low temperature of 32 degrees. The National Weather Service is going to verify all these numbers as they do every day, regardless of whether it's potential record or not. But they're going to go through these numbers, make sure the data is correct and it wasn't, bad data, make sure the feed was okay, make sure the mathematics behind everything, whether it needs to be rounded up or down. They'll go through that. That's why I say provisionally, but regardless, we were in those low to mid 30s again Saturday morning, and it was cold out there. We also had a lot of dense fog this morning, still lingering as of the recording of this video. Depending on how quickly that fog burns off, that's going to determine what our high temperature will be this afternoon. If the fog lingers in towards about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, our high temperatures in the afternoon are going to be lower because we're not able to get as much sun and warm up as quickly. If that fog pretty quickly burns off, we'll be looking at highs in those upper 50s and low 60s. But as things stand right now with how thick the fog is across the valley, we may only make it into the middle 50s. But you see some of the areas where there was not as much fog this morning, such as Colusa, Oroville, even Woodland, upper 50s and low 60s. So again, highs today highly dependent on how quickly that fog lifts. You could even have a difference where maybe Stockton and Manteca see fog that lingers through the afternoon, but maybe Elk Grove sees that fog lift early. So this is just a general idea of what to expect. Again, it's all going to depend on that fog. Over the next 7 days, our morning temperatures are going to be climbing. We're going to see some clouds building in for Sunday. That is going to impact our low temperatures because clouds act as a blanket. So we'll likely be starting closer to 40 degrees for Sunday morning as opposed to low 30s. But that is dependent on that cloud cover. By Monday, clouds should be lifting. We'll still be in the 30s very likely. But then by the time we get to Tuesday morning and onwards, we're now in the 40s. So the mornings where we're starting near freezing should be coming to an end at this point. And while it'll still be chilly in the low 40s out there for this coming week, it won't be as bad as where it has been. High temperatures are going to do the same thing. We're going to go from the 50s into the 60s next week. Our average high over this forecast period is 60 degrees to 58 degrees by Friday. So even by Friday, maybe a little bit above average for the time of year in those low 60s. Parts of the San Joaquin Valley could see mid 60s next week. It's part of a high pressure system that is building in to start December. So as we look at the 8 to 14 day climate outlook, tale of two halves. The eastern half of the United States, very likely cooler than average. The western half, very likely warmer than average for the second week of December. That includes basically, again, the entire part of the western United States and very much so for California in the darker shade of red. Not just temperature, will likely be drier as well. That makes sense based on what we understand of high pressure, right? High pressure typically means calm weather and slightly warmer weather as well. There's something that we look at called the Pacific North American pattern. Maybe you've heard of it as the Pacific North American oscillation. Either one, same thing. But what this tells us is basically the placement of the high pressure. When P&A is positive, that high pressure is closer to California. When P&A is negative, the high pressure is further away. And we know high pressure is what controls that storm door. When it's positive and that high pressure's ahead, right? When it's right overhead of us, it means it's dry and quiet because of the placement of that high. So that storm door is closed, and that continues through the first week of December. And it's not until the end of the second week of December that we start to see that P&A shift negative, which means that high pressure moves out of the way. That would be our next real good chance of some rain 2 weeks from now when that P&A shifts. I'm not necessarily saying it will rain exactly 2 weeks from now, but that's when that storm door begins to open again. You know, visualized differently, right? When we're talking about that Pacific North American pattern. High pressure sitting overhead when it is in its positive phase. We're in a drier and warmer pattern with that high pressure. The storm door closed. Those low pressures ride the ridge. They ride the high pressure from the Gulf of Alaska into western Canada and parts of the very upper Pacific Northwest. When the PNA, that Pacific North American pattern, is in its negative phase, the high pressure moves, right? So sometimes that high pressure is further south. Sometimes it's further to the north. In this example, that high pressure is in the Gulf of Alaska, but the storm door opens. That's the important part. So those low pressures can move through the west coast. They can move through California. These are typically wetter and cooler patterns for us here in California. So now taking that knowledge that we've just learned and applying it to the actual weather pattern that we're looking at, those were some textbook examples. These are real world examples. Here's a little low pressure. This is what's going to bring us the cloud cover on Sunday. Maybe a quick sprinkle of rain for some areas Sunday. But if we see any sprinkles at all, it's going to be basically 1/100 of an inch or less. There's just really no moisture with this storm. But when this low pressure moves, look at this. It's going to track south. High pressure builds in, and that's when we really start to see that PNA go positive, right? By the middle of that first week of December. High pressure builds in. It's a blocking high. That storm door is closed. You see the ridge extends all the way up in towards British Columbia. There's just no way for us to get any rain with a pattern like this. Even towards Friday now, that high pressure sitting right overhead, we could see warmer temperatures for Friday. And the low pressures have nowhere to go but up and over the high pressure system. By the start of the second week of December, December 9th, that high pressure does move a little bit, but it's still out to our west, which is a blocking high pressure. So there's no way for us to really get any meaningful storms. Once we get another several days beyond that, maybe 5 days out or so, then that high pressure actually starts to track further south and that storm door opens for us. Now, again, there's no real good rain chances out there, even 14 days or so, but there are signs that that pattern is changing. So it's something we'll keep an eye on. Over the next 10 days here across Northern California, temperatures warmer in the mornings, like what we talked about, warmer in the afternoons as well. Doesn't mean it's actually warm, just means it's warmer than where we've been. Likely 60s for the first several days of December and dry conditions as well. If you don't already have the ABC 10 Plus app, I recommend you download it. We've got a weather playlist there curated every day. We've got extended forecasts. We've got weather explainers. We've got weather and climate specials as well, where we talk about how climate change is impacting our flood risk and is California doing a good job of managing its water. That's all on the ABC 10 Plus app. Thanks for watching.